The 240SX is probably one of the most common platforms to ever mess around with in the tuner car world. And a lot of the times when people buy the S chassis, even with its increasing prices nowadays, the first thing they do is rip the factory motor out and put something better inside the chassis. Behind me, we have a 1JZ 240SX with a big turbo on it, giant precision. And then on the right, we have an LS1 240SX. This used to be a time attack car, but was converted into a drift car. Both are gutted, both have roll cages. So when it comes to subjectiveness, one's not nicer than the other. At the end of the day, they're both race cars. Basically, I'm gonna go through the ins and outs of what engine swap might be right for you. An import engine swap or a domestic engine swap. And at the end of the day, we're gonna do some driving and show off both cars and talk about why you might wanna choose one over the other. All right, first up, mostly because I want it to be. To give you perspective of how dramatic this car is, this is just me moving. My Fast and Furious fantasy has been fulfilled. It makes all the stereotypical noises you'd expect from an import tuner car. And not only that, it's maybe the best sounding inline six ever made. The 1JZ is a 2.5 liter inline six made by Toyota. Back in the day when I started my own 240SX project with the 2JZ in it, I ran into Ryan Turek at Formula Drift and he asked, "Hey man, how your project's going?" And I said, "Well, I'm about to start on this 2JZ 240SX." And he said instantaneously, "Oh man, why are you going 1J?" And I, at the time I was like 2JZ all day. Now I look back at it and maybe not. And the thing is, if you're looking for an engine swap with character, it's definitely one of the top engine swaps that has emotion and character. And that's what I'm mostly going to be talking about with the 1JZ versus the LS. The 1JZ is 100% an emotional financial decision. It sounds good. It has a really good history with the Supra. And when you hear a 1J, it never gets old. When it comes to value per dollar, that's where things get a little hairy because we're running out of them. There's not as many as there used to be. And not to mention people using them for drift cars and blowing them up and et cetera, et cetera. It being a tuner platform that's so popular, people go through them when they push the limits of the engine. And we're also rocking 420 wheel horsepower. The owner of this car is Scott, and he also had the red S14 2JZ car I reviewed. And that car was meant to be a pretty, pristine restoration and show car. This car does not care about it, hardly at all. It was built to drift with almost no care in the world. It was built just to work. He tediously used a bead roller to create this cool diamond stitch effect on the metal that's on the back panel and on his dash. And at the same time, the engine bay isn't as pretty. It's not made to be pretty. It just has the big fat precision on it. It's a non-BBTI 1J, and that's it. It's an S14 with a 1J that's gutted with an angle kit. And there you have it. It's meant to work. And with a 1J swap or any turbo swap, you're going to have to do a lot more maintenance to it. I don't care what anybody says. Turbos cause problems. They are the best thing in the car world. Turbochargers are so much fun, but you're dealing with intercooler piping, intercoolers, more heat a lot of the times, especially in an engine bay that wasn't engineered to have the engine. And this is coming from a 2JZ owner. There's more things that can go wrong. If you are okay with higher maintenance, then you'll be completely fine. If you have a good mechanical sense of mind, you'll be totally fine. Just be aware that there's gonna be a lot more trial and error when you go out on your first track day or your first drift run to figure out your cooling system, to figure out maybe you need to add an oil cooler. When you're drifting, you don't have the same airflow going into the radiator. And with a big hot turbo, that can cause problems. When we're talking about factory 1JZs, it's pretty rare to find that, heat issue when it comes to drifting. But when you're adding a big turbo to it, a whole bunch of stuff can make life a little bit harder. I just really like the premise of this car. It's an S14 that looks good enough. And can we just take some time to appreciate the livery of the fighter plane, kind of bald eagle on the top of the roof? And it's funny because you think it'd be an LS car with this kind of livery. Basically, they took the LED bars and just put a casing over it, and boom, there's your drift headlight. It's way better than the factory Zinky headlight. It's also got a tile wastegate. That's why we're getting the very dramatic wastegate noises. The emotional response you get from the 1J, nothing but grins. Nothing. Like, everybody smiles when they hear this car rip because it creates this smooth and serene sound. And the 2J has this more aggressive, beefy noise, right? The 1J sounds like somebody playing a violin as it goes up and down the RPM range. It makes you have an emotional response that is unlike almost any engine swap in the world. Oh man, that's the stuff right there. The 1J is the feel-good motor. It's, at the end of the day, it's the feel-good engine. V6 Mustang, okay. Also, at any moment, you can just rip the hydro and just have a ton of fun. It's very inviting. Looking at the hydro, you're like, I want to, but it's not my car. Here's the only issue, is that this is 420 horsepower. But it's a laggy 420 horsepower in comparison to the LS car, which is naturally aspirated. So not only are you spending a lot of money, you're starting off with a lower horsepower base, somewhere in the mid 200s. And then along with that, buying the big turbo, buying a better fuel system, all of that adds up. So if you're trying to go for this emotional journey, then I totally understand it. But you're definitely going to spend more money in the long run than doing the LS swap. If you are okay with that, I get it. But a lot of the times, people are kind of naive to understand that you're starting with an engine that sounds amazing. In my opinion, it sounds better than the LS. But unfortunately, you're gonna be spending more money. Rarer parts, more hard to find parts. Your time to find the parts adds up. So that's, time is money. Along with that, with things getting more and more rare, the prices are getting higher and higher, and that's just how the cookie crumbles. All right, guys, let's head over to the LS car and make a good comparison. Before we move on to the Murica LS Swap 240, this video is sponsored by Carvana, a new way to sell your car. The good news is you can forget all the hassles of going to the dealership, dealing with a salesperson to get an offer. You can do it the easy way with Carvana. Carvana makes it so incredibly simple to find out what your car is worth. And all you have to do is enter your license plate number and your VIN number. And unlike other sites, this isn't an estimate. This is a real offer that Carvana will actually buy your car for. You answer a few questions and you get an offer. It's that simple. And if you choose to accept the offer, Carvana will swing by, check out the car, and then if you accept the offer, cut you a check right on the spot. And you can do this all 100% online without having to talk to a used car salesman. And best of all, it only takes 2 minutes. Carvana has purchased over 200,000 cars from these customers. And to join these customers, go to the link in the description below and get your free offer in just 2 minutes. So make sure to head over to getcarvana.com/blue. Thank you guys so much, and let's hear some bald eagles. LS is a little bit bit different of a vibe, right? It's funny in a world where a LS Swap 240 is probably gonna get more unwanted attention than a 1JZ 240, which is open downpipe and loud, or open dump, excuse me. I know you can probably make the argument that, you know, one's an S14, one's an S13. When they're fully gutted, they feel almost identical. Even though the S13 feels a little bit more small. Driving around, naturally aspirated. For the sake of this conversation, you could go find a junk 5.3 or whatever Chevy V8 and you're good, right? You can drop it in. With an LS motor, it fits, that's not an issue. There's no turbo, that's not an issue. So you have a better feeling transmission than the R154. It has a T56 gearbox, so it has a very strong transmission. They put this transmission in everything. The Vipers, the Terminator Cobras, the Camaros, you name it. An LS in the 240, even though to the ear, it's not what people think, right? When you see a 240 with a V8 in it, and you see it slide by, your brain kind of malfunctions, right? It's like, that's not supposed to sound like that. Merca. But when it comes to the chassis and how the car drives, it feels very natural. It doesn't feel like it's out of place. Unfortunately, you don't have this symphony of turbos and an inline six. You have a much more even torque curve, so at any moment you get on it, your power is always there, right? With the 1J, you have to spool it up and get the power going. And the handling of this is absolutely incredible. It feels amazing because of how sorted this chassis is. It's also a dry sump system, so it makes it even better for the oil slushing back and forth. We also have a race pack dash, so all our data is there. But I've driven LS Swap 240s before, and much more on a budget setup. All in all, for the money, you're getting more power out of the box, you get more torque out of the box, and at the same time, it's cheaper, period. I'm sorry about the squeaking. We're in a fully gutted race car. There's nothing I can do about it, by the way. And it's all cheaper. Everything is cheaper. You start with a 5.3, put it together, still cheaper than a 1J that's bone stock. So why do people not just always LS think? Well, that's why they do. At the end of the day, that's why the LS is so common. It's not a heavy engine, and it works. And if something does go wrong, parts are everywhere. With the 1J, if parts go wrong, it's not as bad as, say, an RB26, which is even harder to find parts for, but you're gonna be hunting a longer time for the 1J to fix it. Rather than LS, you go to Advanced Auto Parts, you get what you need, because they put LSs in everything. The funny way I put it is, if you're a video creator or a YouTuber or whatever you want to call it, the 1J is a better choice because it sounds more dramatic and it comes through video much more emotional. The LS it's a V8 at the end of the day. Even if it's the better choice, it's a V8. Distribution, no turbos to worry about, but if you like turboing, you can add on 200 more horsepower if you really wanted to do it, very much like I just did Gingium's Volvo. Woo! The LS will get you on the track faster, the 1J will evoke more of a flex and create more of an emotional response from your peers, the car scene, everything. So emotion versus efficiency and logic. Logically, the V8 is the logical decision. But when it comes to making illogical choices and doing car builds, the 1J is the dramatic one. It's a theatrical one. We'll leave it up to you guys. Which one would you own? The LS or the 1J. Make sure to hit the bell and the like button. I just realized that only 78,000 people have notifications on, so make sure to hit the bell, hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, because the algorithm is not very nice to me. So on that note, have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for watching this video. Goodbye.